everybody, my name is Charlotte19, and this is my entry into the Classy Whale Washington DC contest. Let's get into it. Our story begins in the old port city of Alexandria, Virginia in 1855. There, a group of local businessmen chartered the Alexandria, Loudoun, and Hampshire Railroad, which was planned to build westward to the coal fields of then Western Virginia. Construction quickly began, but the railroad only reached west to Leesburg before the start of the Civil War interrupted construction. The railroad saw heavy use during the war, but was nearly destroyed by it. After the line was restored in 1867, its owners then pitched a grand series of schemes for the little line, aiming to directly compete against the likes of the Baltimore, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. None of these plans came to be, and the line went through a dizzying series of bankruptcies, name changes, eventually ending up as a part of the new Southern Railway in 1894. The Southern quickly dubbed their new line the Bluemont Branch, after extending it westward to the resort town of the same name in 1900. This was as far as the little line would get, only 50 miles from Washington, D.C. At the same time, an electric trolley line between Georgetown and Great Falls, aptly called Great Falls and Old Dominion, was being built. It ended up being successful enough that it looked for ways to expand, quickly settling on the Bluemont Branch. After negotiating a lease with the Southern and building a connecting line between the GF&OD and the Bluemont Branch, the Washington Old Dominion came into being in 1912. The line was then fully electrified. The W&OD made it through the 1910s and 1920s just fine, although the railroad never actually made a profit. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, the W&OD crashed out hard, declaring bankruptcy in 1932. The W&OD was able to survive by taking drastic measures. The Great Falls line was abandoned in 1934, which cut losses just enough to allow the railroad to be reorganized. The Bluemont-Purcellville line was abandoned in 1939, with passenger service being discontinued in 1941. In 1940, the ancient and costly electrification system began to be replaced with brand new GE 44-tonner diesel locomotives, a move that not only saved the railroad but allowed it to post its first profit that same year. In 1943, the railroad was forced to resume passenger service due to the war, which would continue until 1951 when the mail contract was revoked. The W&OD began to prosper in the post-war years, serving the growing suburbs of Northern Virginia. This was set to go into overdrive when it was announced that Potomac Electric was planning to build a new power plant near Sterling. This led the Chesapeake and Ohio to buy the W&OD in 1956, although they kept it as a mostly independently run subsidiary. Unfortunately, the power plant was instead built across the Potomac River in Dickerson, Maryland. However, another big project was gearing up that would give the railroad traffic, the construction of Dulles Airport. Throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s, the W&OD was busy hauling materials for the airport. It was around this time that traffic began to decline in the W&OD, as the expanding Northern Virginia suburbs began to suffocate the railroad. Between 1963 and 1964, the Roslyn branch was abandoned in 2 stages to make way for the construction of I-66. The C&O sought to abandon the railroad in 1965. This proved to be very controversial, as the abandonment case was fiercely fought, but ultimately the regulators granted approval. The Washington Old Dominion ran its final train in August of 1968. As for the right-of-way, it was purchased by VEPCO, who used it for power lines. Many local residents began to use the corridor as an unofficial trail, which eventually culminated in the official W&OD Trail, which was opened in stages between 1974 and 1988. So you've seen the title, let's get into the fun part, the alternate history. Remember that power plant that Potomac Electric was planning to build near Sterling? Well, what if it was built? Construction would begin in 1956 with the plant opening in 1959. During this time, the C&O would upgrade the W&OD between Alexandria and Sterling, while also building a new connecting track to the plant, which would be located where Algonquin Park is today. Loaded coal trains would travel over the C&O between West Virginia and Alexandria, where they would be handed off to the W&OD, who would employ power leased from their parent to haul trains to the plant. The W&OD's eclectic fleet of switchers would be inadequate to do so. These leased locomotives would eventually be replaced by new EMD GP35 locomotives bought specifically for these trains. As the 1960s progressed, interest in rail transit around the DMV would start to increase. This would culminate in the formation of the Washington Metropolitan Transit Authority in 1967. WMATA, along with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, looked into using the W&OD for a commuter rail line between West Falls Church and Herndon, an option they ultimately rejected. The difference in this timeline is that the W&OD isn't on its last legs, and so plans for a line are included into WMATA's adopted regional system. Of course, it's not WMATA's highest priority, since they still need to build the Orange Line out to West Falls Church first. The 1970s would also see several major developments on the W&OD. First, the C&O and its subsidiary the B&O's adoption of the chassis system branding in 1973 would be extended to the W&OD. Second, the line west from Leesburg to Purcellville would be abandoned as that segment had little traffic. Third, the W&OD would see a massive boost in profits through getting into the incentive per diem boxcar game. This was a business strategy adopted by many short lines in the 1970s in response to a national boxcar shortage. Short lines would buy a large number of boxcars and have them run all over the country, collecting the per diems from the other railroads using them. Most of these boxcars would only touch home rails a few times in their lives. 1980 would see the chassis system and the Seaboard Coastline merge to form CSX. Things wouldn't change at first, as it wasn't until 1986 when CSX merged its subsidiary roads into a unified CSX brand. The W&OD would be folded into the 1986 merger, ending 74 years of existence. The IPD business also crashes during this time, with the W&OD storing or simply scrapping most of their boxcars. 1986 would see the return of passenger service along the W&OD, as service would start on the Bluemont line, harkening back to the old Southern name. It would open concurrently with the completion of Amada's Orange Line to West Falls Church. As compared to the original plans, the line would extend all the way out to Leesburg and feature a branch to Dulles Airport. Equipment would be similar to that used on MARC and later VRE, with F40s and gallery coaches. In addition, out and back commuter trains, both ways express trains to Dulles would be run. The 1990s would be relatively quiet, with only small incremental improvements to the Bluemont line and the transformation of the former W&OD into just another secondary line for CSX. The 2000s would begin to see some major changes, as the growth of the Northern Virginia suburbs would require more than just commuter trains, as the line would begin its transformation into true regional rail. All days, both-way service would start to be implemented, and the F40s would be replaced with P42s. Coal shipments to the power plant would slowly get less frequent, as coal starts to lose out to both renewables and natural gas. The 2010s would see these later trends continue, with the coal power plant closing later in the decade. With this, CSX would finally sell the line to Amada, who would then in turn contract out the remaining freight operations on the line to Regional Rail, who would revive the Washington Old Dominion name. As for the Bluemont line, new equipment in the form of Siemens Chargers and Nippon Shiro coaches would start to replace the aging fleet. A number of major service improvements in the form of increased frequency and high-level platforms would be introduced. This would start near the end of the 2010s, with the process mostly wrapping up by 2024. And that is how I think the Washington Old Dominion would end up into the modern day. It was really fun to delve into the history of this strange railroad and to come up with a plausible scenario as to how it could have survived and thrived. But what about the future of the actual W&OD trail? Or maybe even railroad? The Nova Transit Revitalization Advocacy Coalition, or NovaTrack for short, is pushing for a study on building a new modern commuter rail line alongside the current W&OD trail. It's pretty similar to what I described in the video. Their website is linked below, please take a look. I would also like to thank Classy Whale for putting on this contest, the W&OD Rared Facebook page for many of the photos I used in this video, GAMWolferz for going out and getting VRE footage for me, and everyone else who gave encouragement. This video was really fun and challenging to make, mostly because I don't really live in the DMV anymore, but I'm really happy about how it turned out. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.